Okay, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. Today we'll be talking about base systems for athletic facilities. The goal of this conversation is to better understand the role of base systems in sports facility construction and how different approaches perform over time. I'd like to touch on a few areas, especially including some of the challenges with traditional bases, how weather affects long-term performance, what makes the UltraBase system different from an engineering perspective, and what you've seen in real installations years after construction. And at the end, we'll also briefly discuss costs and where this type of system tends to make the most sense in sports projects. So we have the pleasure to be accompanied by subject matter experts from UltraBase Systems, a company specialized in modular interlocking base systems for fields and courts. Let's do a quick round of introductions. So first we have Kelly Waldrop. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, how you doing, Auntie? It's great to be here.
So can you briefly let us know who you are and what you do at UltraBase?
Yeah, like I said, my name's Kelly Waldrop. I'm the director of UltraBase, and I've been with UltraBase just about 2 years. So I've had a lot of experience over those last 2 years, and we've got a great team that helps educate me, and also has been with UltraBase for a long time.
And then we have Nancy Alexander. Hi, Nancy.
Hi there, Auntie. Good morning. Yes, my name is Nancy. I have been with the company about 6 years. I started under the founder, Dave Barlow, and he was basically my mentor. So everything that I've learned, it came from him. I'm the senior sales manager, and hopefully I can ask any question that you throw at me.
And last but not least, we have Chad Larson. Hi, Chad.
Hello, great to be here. Appreciate you having me. My name is Chad Larson. I'm the general manager of UltraBase Systems. I have about 6 years of experience in the surfacing industry, broad variety of experience in artificial turf, modular interlocking court panels, and of course, UltraBase systems.
Nice to meet all of you. Let's start the conversation with problems with traditional concrete bases. Kelly, traditionally sports fields and courts use a hard base beneath the playing surface made out of rock, concrete, or asphalt. From your experience, what problems tend to appear years after a concrete base is installed under a sports court or a field?
Well, obviously there's, concrete in some applications is great, but you can experience issues with concrete over time. I've always heard there's two types of concrete, cracked concrete and concrete that's going to crack. So obviously that's a predicament that you can have. But, some of the upfront hurdles with concrete are, you have to pull permits. There's a lot of municipalities and HOAs that don't allow any more permeable bases like concrete. It also has a higher installation cost going in, and installation of concrete can be quite messy, not only on the homeowner's landscape, but also in the streets. And it can also take a lot longer. There's a lot of different issues that you can have with concrete. Ultra-base systems, we can come in with a minimal base material and be able to put a court in a backyard without pulling permits, and it's completely mobile. So if you want to take it up, it's very easy to take it up and move it. So there's a lot of benefits to our base systems over concrete.
You mentioned concrete cracking. How do cracks or movement in the concrete base affect the playing surface above it over time?
Well, obviously a crack is because the base has moved in some way. So it can be as simple as just a crack, but most of the time when you do have a crack, the court becomes uneven in certain areas around that crack. So if it's on a corner, if a corner's fallen, it didn't have a great base when it was installed, you can have issues. Also, as you go through the four seasons, winter and summer, ice and moisture will get in that crack and it'll just make it a lot worse. And when water drains into that crack, it can wash out the base from underneath it. So cracks can be an issue.
What about then for resurfacing projects, like when contractors resurface courts or fields built on concrete? What type of underlying problems do they often discover?
Auntie, that's kind of out of my expertise level. I'm not quite sure, the process of resurfacing. We just hadn't got much in depth with that, but I can tell you that, it's an ongoing process. Resurfacing has to be done time and time again. It's really, if you've got a crack, the crack's generally not going to stop. So, you can resurface it and, the crack will eventually come through even after resurfacing. It's kind of difficult, once that crack starts. And just because it starts in one place doesn't mean it's not going to start anywhere else. And then that can create a problem where that crack is, where the new crack is.
Let's talk about the weather and how that can affect base systems for athletic facilities. So, Nancy, project owners may have installed a top-notch turf field or a court system with a solid concrete base, but if the facility is located in an area with tough weather conditions, the investment may quickly be compromised. So, which weather conditions tend to cause the most damage to traditional base systems in your experience?
Well, I would say typically for those folks who live in a climate that changes with the seasons, with the freeze and the thaw. So, for example, in the Northeast and the Midwest here in the United States, you have a very, very hot summer, and then you can go to the extreme, like we've had this winter, where you have a tremendous amount of snowfall, 2 feet or more. And so, with that constant changing of conditions, that can definitely affect the traditional way of installing a concrete court.
And when it comes to drainage, what typically happens beneath the surface when water cannot drain properly from a sports field or court base?
So when you have a field on concrete or an existing hardscape, really there's only one way for the water to drain, and that would be to drain out horizontally and down into, let's say, a French drain. The difference is with our panels are manufactured to allow drainage so that the water will come down through the turf, through the panels, and be absorbed down into the ground, into the soil. So that's a huge attribute when using our panel system over traditional concrete.
Right. That's a good segue to talking about the engineering difference between the UltraBase system and traditional rock, concrete, or asphalt systems. So, Chad, how does the UltraBase modular system differ from traditional rock or concrete bases?
From a traditional base standpoint, the difference with the UltraBase really categorized into 4 different areas. It allows for drainage, it allows for airflow, it allows for stability and structural rigidity while still allowing for horizontal movement of expansion and contraction when temperature fluctuations occur, which prevents cracking, which leads to all the other problems that we previously discussed.
Was there, like 20 years ago when UltraBase was founded, was there a specific engineering problem that UltraBase set out to solve for sports construction?
Essentially, all 4 of those components. Airflow and drainage is critical to keeping a surface dry and playable and usable. The airflow that the base panels allow for also contribute to the ability for that water to drain vertically through the base panels and then into the native soil or sheet flowing sideways from there. And our interlocking system creates a very rigid system that's extremely stable, especially in combination with a high tensile strength and low elongation underlayment that creates almost like a suspension bridge type of effect underneath that adds to the stability while still allowing for that flexibility in outdoor applications where, due to shifts in temperature, humidity, and whatnot, these applications are always moving. And with rigid bases such as concrete or even without UltraBase panels, it does not allow for that and then leads to eventual base degradation otherwise.
So if there's a lot of foot traffic or heavy load on top of the playing surface, how does the structural behavior of UltraBase panels differ from a traditional base system?
That is one of the areas where it really shines in particular, because you've not only got the structural stability of the panels that are interlocked together, but again, with an underlayment that's paired with it underneath that has a very high tensile strength and very low elongation, it creates another layer of strength. Essentially, that underlayment supports the weight of the load in addition to the interlocking system that creates a much more stable and a base system that will deform less under load.
Okay, interesting. So like I mentioned before, correct me if I'm wrong, but UltraBase Systems was founded in the early 2000s and it was first designed for golf courses. Am I correct?
Correct.
Right.
Outdoor. Yes, that's correct.
Right. So you've had a good 20 years, a little bit more, to install UltraBase systems in the market. What have you learned from some of the earliest UltraBase installations after many years of use? This is a free question for anybody who wants to chip in.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So, great example. I had a gentleman that reached out to me just recently, And he was one of the first, I guess, pioneers that installed UltraBase panels in his yard to create a putting green. And he was telling me that it was time for him to replace the turf. When he pulled the turf up, he said the panels were in excellent condition, as if they were just laid, and they were down in the ground for 20 years. And he just couldn't, have enough positive to say about the longevity of the panels over all of that time. And that's here in Florida, where we can have a lot of rain, and not just a lot of rain, but in a very short period of time. So things have a tendency to flood quickly. And as far as the longevity and stability, the panels were basically the same as when he laid them 20 years ago.
How would you compare the longevity between like traditional bases and UltraBase system?
Traditional bases basically would be a crushed rock base, followed by possibly sand and turf on top. After time, with the elements, that's going to break down the sand and the crushed rock base, and those materials are going to dissipate and move. With our panels, of course, you're not going to have that issue with the way that they're installed and with the interlocking system.
I'm assuming you offer quite a long warranty for your panels. So
We do. We have a very healthy warranty, and I can tell you, Auntie, that in the 6 years that I've worked for the company, I can't remember one warranty issue, not one, where we've had to replace panels over a period of time because, as long as they're being used is the way that they were made to be used, yeah, we have not had any warranty issues.
I don't know if who should be taking this question, but like in projects where the playing surface was replaced, has there been cases where the UltraBase panels remained in place, they didn't have to be removed or replaced, that they could just be left in the ground and you would just lay on top a new surface?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one, Auntie. That's one of the beauties of UltraBase is at turf end of life, for the most part, the turf is removed and disposed of, and the new turf can go right back on it. Traditional bases like rock, normally they'll be driving heavy equipment out there to remove the turf and bring the turf in, and they have to go back and rework that graded material, where with UltraBase, a lot of times you can pull skid steers straight out on it and either remove and then reinstall new turf. So one of the benefits is end of life turf. It's very easily to change the turf, and that we get a lot of feedback from our installers who've been with us for 8 to 10 years, which is normally an end of life of turf. And they say, hey, I went back and we replaced the turf, and I was in and out of there quick because we didn't have to do any work except for, bring out the knives and lay down the turf and re-glue it and move on.
Yeah,
Nancy Mike can add. She's been with it a lot longer than me and had a lot more feedback. So I don't know if Nancy's got anything to add to that.
No, I think you touched on pretty much every attribute. I don't think I really have much more to add to that.
That sounds really good. That sounds like a very good benefit for the project owners relating to what we discussed about longevity. So not only from the warranty perspective, but also if you need to replace the playing surface, you don't have to really touch the base layer itself. So that's a big plus.
To all these installers, time is money. And if they can save time, they're making more money.
All right. So to finish off the interview, let's tackle a couple of practical questions that most project owners tend to be interested in. So how does the overall project cost, including materials, labor, equipment, and logistics, of an UltraBase system typically compared to traditional bases like stone, asphalt, or concrete bases?
When you're kind of comparing the two, you have to remember it's not just about the cost of the materials themselves. And a lot of times we have to remind our dealers of that. You're not kind of comparing just the costs apples to apples. It's really an overall cost of the material itself. So the cost of concrete, depending on where you live, the labor, right, to prepare the concrete, to bring the concrete in, and the labor costs of the individuals that have to actually lay the concrete, the crushed stone and the concrete, versus our costs, which would be just the cost of the panel itself and the reduced labor and time to install the same type of project, right? So it may take, it may require 2 to 3 years to lay our panels down in a day, compared to all of the people that are involved in mixing the concrete, driving the truck, the people that actually are there spreading the concrete, the time it takes for it to cure so that they can move on with the project. So you have to really combine all of those costs when you're doing a comparison.
Right.
Yeah. And Chad, do you want to maybe mention from a field standpoint the time trial that we did and some of the studies with that and what we found?
Absolutely. We've recently conducted a time trial of 1,000 square foot project site with 3 professional installers who conducted a traditional installation from start to finish, including removal of native sod and soil. And the overall project timeline took 2.5 hours with UltraBase versus 6.5 hours with a traditional installation methodology. In terms of man hours, that was 12 man hours saved. And when you calculate all the expenses that come into that, equipment delivery fees, rental fees, not to even mention all of the collateral damage that happens when you need heavy equipment to work with traditional installation methodology, you ultimately end up saving money on that project and getting it done in less than half the time. And one of the things that really stands out to installers, as Kelly mentioned, time is money. Their capacity in using UltraBase allows them to knock out 2.5 times the projects in the same amount of time. And particularly in 4-season climate areas where it's really feast or famine with these projects for the contractors, if they can get 2 or 3 times as many jobs done within that same time period and at a lower cost as well, it's an obvious win.
What would be the applications that benefit the most from UltraBase systems?
So I can touch on that. A very good example would be in these highly populated metropolitan areas like New York City, Chicago, where they have really run out of ground space. And so people have gotten really creative and they're using rooftops. I can't tell you how many rooftop applications, UltraBase panels have been used for. And whether that's just a turf area for walking, for just hanging out, could be for a pool area, it could be for a putting green. And so you can envision being in Manhattan on the 20th floor of a rooftop. How do you haul rock up there to lay turf? Whereas you can easily get the panels up there, it's less mess, it's less cost, the labor involved. And so that's one of the types of applications that our panels become very cost efficient.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about then from like the recognition from the sports governing bodies, like, I don't know, USTA, FIFA, whatever you want to name? Does UltraBase Systems have recognition from these organizations, or?
Well, there's a lot of testing data that goes in. I mean, you've got FIFA, and we've got panels and turf systems that are approved or meet the standards, let's say, because there's a lot that goes into those fields. But yes, we've got fields that have met FIFA standards. We do a lot of testing with our panels as far as fall height and also for Gmax, which is important to any field application. So we've got, and that's the beauty of UltraBase, especially on our basis for turf. So we've got panels that can start at a very economical point and go all the way up to a max panel, let's say, that is really designed for football fields or soccer pitches or baseball fields, where it's got a foam back and a polypropylene shell on top, and it meets all the standards. And even in states like California, where they're not allowing a lot of fill to go into their fields anymore, because the standard was, hey, let's everybody's using rubber pellets. Well, now they want to go back to a natural sand base, and what that means is, without having to bring in a whole lot of sand, then you're starting to work with turf systems that don't give as much cushion. So it's relying more on the base to give a lot more of the Gmax rating than the actual turf. And that's where some panels like UltraBase, and there's a lot of great panels in the marketplace, but UltraBase has an application, a product to fit that application as well.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I've had for today. It's been a very enlightening conversation, and hopefully our viewers can draw some useful insights from the interview. Thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated, and hope the best for UltraBase in 2026 and beyond.
Thank you, Antti.
All right.
It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you, Antti. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.